Now if I hit the accelerator, I have to apologize. It's been a little bit since I've been able to work on this. I've been waiting on batteries to show up, and they finally showed up. Now, we couldn't quite come to an agreement with the owner about which batteries we were going to go with, so these are what I decided to go with. Now, this isn't just another battery video. I think they're called litime, even though to me it looks like they're litime. He wanted to go with lithium batteries because we're down to not want to do maintenance anymore, and lead acid batteries like this is high maintenance. But also, of course, we're going to have much better performance with the lithium iron phosphate batteries. Even though there's 6 of these 6-volt batteries, 3 on this side, 3 on the other, they're all in series, which means positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative to make 36 volts, which means all we have is the amp hour capacity of the one battery. So we don't add up the capacity of all these batteries, just the voltages of the batteries, because they're all in series like that. And in fairness, the amp hour capacity of a golf cart battery or a 6-volt battery is why golf carts use these batteries, because their reserve capacity or their amp hour capacity is 225 amp hours in general, somewhere around there. So this one 36-volt battery with the 6-volt batteries is about 225 amps. Now remember, they're lead acid batteries, so we don't want to use all of them. We can only use 50% of them, so that's about 100 and I don't know, what are we calling it, 13 amp hours of capacity. With the reserve capacity below 50%, we shouldn't ever really touch, because that will damage the batteries. And like I said, this is not going to be a battery video, but I'm just trying to give you my thoughts about what I went with. Because these batteries were split, 3 on this side, 3 on that side, I wasn't sure which batteries I was going to go with. I would still like to keep it all in one and getting rid of all these battery cables that are in between and having to not worry about communication between each individual battery to create that one big battery cell. And then the other problem is that even though I've gotten in arguments with a commenter before about tapping into the middle of a battery bank, if you'll notice these 2 wires right here, this one goes to negative, and then this one goes over to here, which comes over to here, which is positive. So that's the negative and that's the positive of a 12-volt lead, which is just 2 batteries in series. So the cart manufacturer did tap off 12-volt, which I assume would be for control circuitry and for the lights on the front and on the back. So even though I was told nobody ever does this, I am aware that this is done, and it's done quite a bit, even on bus conversions that are 24 volt on the chassis. A lot of those bus converters will tap in 12 volt on a 24 volt system. So I know that it happens, and I'm going to have to address that too, because I can't tap on a 12 volt to a 36 volt lithium iron phosphate battery that I'm going to be using. The first thing I need to do is to get access to all the controls and electronics that's going to be underneath right here, so I can put the batteries in. And while I did set up this solar array to be a little bit more modular so I could access underneath right here, I don't want to stress this thing out, because I don't know how long I'm going to be underneath here working, and put a kickstand up that's going to accidentally fall over and break stuff. So what I'm just going to do is pull the 4 screws out right there. The proof of concept is in place, and I'm just going to get the whole array out of the way, then I can get access to underneath. Alright, so with that out of the way, now I can get this piece of plywood out of the way. Alright, now with that out of the way and protecting my solar panels over there, we can kind of get an overview of the battery setup. So we have that positive battery cable and this negative one right there. They go through what I would call a quick disconnect right here, which will save me from having to put an actual disconnect on, because you can just disconnect the battery. If we follow this red wire up over here, this goes to what I would say was overcurrent protection at some point, but it is no longer overcurrent protection, has been bypassed. And then the black one comes over here, and it goes down to this battery set up over there, which then comes back through on the black one for the series, because it comes down over to, let's see, yeah, this motor controller down here. So the positive is up here and the negative is down there. This positive goes to the contacts right there, and from the contacts over here comes back down to the motor controller. And it looks like the 12 volt comes over to here to these isolated studs, and that becomes part of the control circuitry for all these relays, and likely for the tail lights and anything else that might be of interest to you guys. Now, I did not touch anything in here, so I do notice that that control board, I don't know what it does, but it's just floating in there. I don't know what that's supposed to be hooked up to. Likely to maybe the park brake switch or the reverse switch there. I don't like how those wires are all touching, and I don't know what that goes to. So I was not asked to fix this. See, I don't even know what that's for. But I'll try to make it as safe as I can, at least get this stuff out of the way. So what I can tell you is we're going to take the 6 batteries out. I will be reusing these battery cables to connect this whole thing up again. Like I said, these will be the quick disconnect anyways. I'm really not quite sure how the charger was ever supposed to work on this. I assume the charger would have gone back here, but short of hooking up a charger directly to the batteries, I don't see an actual charge port on here. It's a little bit alarming too. So while I was not asked to make it be able to charge for a 110 outlet, we're just going to be charging from the solar panels on top. That won't be a hindrance to me, but if you're going to be building your own cart, you might want to figure out a way to hook up the charger in the back to charge up those batteries. It won't be too much, but I don't even have a charger for this, so that's not going to be on my list of things to do. The only thing that will be on my list of things to make sure is that because this overcurrent protection right there has been bypassed, I make sure I have my own overcurrent protections down here at the battery, so I'm not responsible for my battery installation. I'll recommend the customer do something about their overcurrent protection right there. So first things first, let's go ahead and disconnect the batteries and disable them. Ow, that hurt. And the 12 volt right there. There's another 12 volt tap. That's really strange. I should have just tapped it back there, but if you'll notice, there's no inline fuse on this either. I don't know where that goes to. So I assume that's probably, it looks like aftermarket, so probably to the headlight switch there. Yeah, there's the new wires, it looks like. So again, because I'm going to have to be responsible for it, the 12 volt that I put in, I will put an inline fuse on. Let me get the batteries off. Alright, so these are the batteries we went with based on price and durability and the reviews that I've seen from a lot of other creators online. They seem to be decent quality batteries, and then these are set up to be golf cart batteries, so we will install them according to the directions. But there it is, just one big battery, and I'm really hoping that the measurements that I got online are the same measurements that are on this battery, because these are the maximums that I really felt comfortable doing, and it looks like it's gonna fit. So on this one, the main reason why I chose it was because it had a maximum continuous discharge current of 200 amps rather than 100. Some of those other batteries are a little bit cheaper. The BMS is only rated at 100 continuous discharge amperage. That's its charge, and I didn't want to have somebody put the throttle down and trip the internal BMS and then have to wait for it to reset and then slightly put the pedal down. When it's coming to the installation of it, it's not saying that I need to add any sort of shock absorption underneath it. This is built for a golf cart already, so the absorption's already within the case itself. It is a plastic case, and then we're going with a 36 volt system, so you can go parallel, but you cannot go series. And the most important one is, I think it was right here, you can charge them with solar. So everything does seem to be pretty well. It says, do not disassemble the battery. I will not disassemble it. Do not install it upside down. keep it away from fire and never soak it in water. So if this is soaked in water, it's probably sunk somewhere, so we should be okay there. Otherwise, don't connect to different types of battery, lithium iron phosphate batteries, and everything else is pretty straightforward. Make sure it's wired correctly. And look at that. We even get some stickers. I'm not sure who that guy is. Alright, so the first thing I need to check is obviously if it fits. Now you can see it's not incredibly heavy, but it fits. Important things I need to tell you about this battery from litime or litime. This is a 100 amp hour battery, 38.4 volts. So simple math right there, 38 or 3900 watt hours. There is full-time power here. So like a normal battery, there is no on-off switch. So it's shipped with voltage at 39.46. So it's important that you don't short that out. There is no onboard disconnect, which is a little bit disappointing. And I did find out this one did not come with Bluetooth connectivity, so I can't manage it. But Bluetooth is just a simple drop-in battery. Let me fit on this. I don't think that fits. I take that back. It does fit on that. Now I have to devise a way to secure these batteries down, and then we'll cut back to what I figured out. All right, here's what I came up with. I'm going to put 3 bolts in. These are about 5/16, pretty decent bolts. And I think those 3 bolts will be more than enough to hold the battery from moving around. And they're spaced enough away so that those bolts and hardware don't affect the battery installation. And then I can just still reuse these J bolts right here to mount this to. I'll just have to make some spacers, which I will make out of this 1/2-inch PEX. So I won't be, so this will take the brunt of any compression force, so I'm not trying to compress the ABS plastic itself. Because we're just trying to keep this thing from shifting around. It not has a lot of weight to it compared to those lead acid batteries there. So maybe some people should say that it should be a little bit more solid than plastic, but I think it's going to be a good spacer. Mostly because I need a spacer, because these bolts aren't threaded long enough right at that point to clamp down. And even though I didn't ask for it, like I said, these will give a little bit of absorption built into the clamps that are holding down on that plastic case too. I'm not saying there's a lot of spring to it, but I think that's going to work out pretty well. We'll just do the same thing over on that side too. All right, so the second one's mounted and installed. Now I have to find a place to run all the battery cables together. I know everybody will be upset if the cables on this battery and the cables on that battery are different lengths. So what I'm going to try to do is put a central location with a bus bar, because I don't want to go from that to battery to this battery back to this battery, because we have to go in parallel. So we can't just make one connection point down here at one battery because of the way this whole thing is set up. So I'm going to try to make a central clearinghouse location for all the battery connections. And it is a Lynx Power bus bar, but it's not a smart one. It's a dummy one. So it's literally just a bus bar. There's no guts to it at all, so I'll be able to hook up positive to negative from the batteries, and then tap off that to go to the motor controller down there, 36 volt to 12 volt converter, and of course the solar charge controller, which I haven't got to yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and mount the bus bar. Right here is about gonna be perfect. So I'll just try to mount it right there, keep all those ends from getting damaged or touching the metal. And it should be pretty secured on this actual frame rail right there. Because I think I'm gonna have basically all the connections over in this area and that tray over there. The 12 volt that was on these isolated studs here. I'm gonna relocate these studs over to here, since that wiring is going to the front anyways for controlling purposes. That way it makes a lot more sense to get the 12 volt tap off of there to these isolated studs, and I think I have more than enough room over there for it. Isolated stud is just what it sounds like. It's a plastic stud that's isolated from the frame. That way the battery cables can get hooked up to it without shorting anything out. Pretty simple. They're really not too much different than what you might expect from a fuse holder like that. It's isolated from the frame that, or the surface that it's mounted to. In this situation, we're going to be adding 300 amp fuses. Since the maximum capacity or discharge is going to be 200 amps, so this should be far in excess of the maximum output from the batteries. And 300, if it goes above that, we got a short anyways, right? And then this right here will be my overcurrent protection for the solar that we're installing. It's way bigger than I need it to be, but that's fine. Again, this remember, overcurrent protection is there to protect the wiring from shorting and melting, not to protect components. I have the overcurrent protection. It'll be a 300 amp fuse. We'll go through the quick disconnect for the battery. Then over here, I have the bus bar. So that's going to be the front battery on the right, front battery on the left. I used another fuse holder as an actual isolator stud. So that's the positive isolator stud, that's the negative isolator stud, to just connect all that and keep a disconnect on that battery. Over here we just have the mirror image with another inline fuse holder. It'll have its own fuse. And I set it up so that you can still take this all out without getting that stuff in the way. And of course these cables will just be going right there and they'll get secured. Otherwise, I did relocate those 12 volt isolator studs, got those wired up. And then I have the controller, so that's the negative for the controller going to the negative bus bar there, and then the positive is coming over here to that overcurrent protection that probably doesn't work, but it doesn't matter anymore because we have overcurrent protection here now. Now, as much as I'd like to get this thing moved out of the sun and cool off a little bit and stop overheating, I have to get control circuitry hooked up, and that's 12 volts, so I need a 12 volt converter. Because remember, these are 36 volt batteries and the control circuitry is 12 volt. So I did purchase a 36 to 12 volt converter right here. It's pretty much generic. Get it for most our golf carts online. We have 36 volt input and 12 volt output. It says 20 amp max. So that should be able to handle everything that I have on there. And then I just have to find a place to secure this and then wire it up to the power over there. All right. So these litime batteries just come with a little plastic cap for the terminals. And then I have the 300 amp fuse in there with protection on it. We're not plugged in, so the disconnect is still on. Or off, I guess, on both of them. Everything's set up, so the next thing to do is plug in the batteries. Now before I do that, I will point out that this right there is the overcurrent protection that I assume goes over to the headlights. I think I put a 15 amp fuse on that. There's overcurrent protection for the 36 volt 12 volt converter. Nothing's tied up because I just assume everything's going to be having to take apart again. I do have a 20 amp fuse in there. So I think I'm ready to actually plug this in. Alright guys, I did manage to get it out of the sun there, but there were a lot of problems when I last was working on this. So now it's important to know, when the customer dropped this off, they just rolled it off the trailer. I had the assumption that they drove it off and that this thing was delivered working. So when I hooked up the batteries like this, and I turned the kill switch on, so I could check and make sure that my wiring from the batteries to the control and that 36 volt and that 36 volt to 12 volt converter was all wired up before I secure everything. And I hit the accelerator here. And I only got a click. Now, I can't speak for you guys, but I know how much time I have invested in this and how much money and materials I have invested in this, which is difficult to get back if what you worked on isn't fixed or operating. You understand? So I had to do a lot of troubleshooting and contact the customer to find out, was it working? Is there anything that I need to know about it? And besides finding out that maybe this hasn't been used in about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, as far as they knew, it worked when they stopped using it, but they haven't used it in that entire time. So I spent the better part of 6 hours now troubleshooting, reaching out to golf cart companies locally to find out what I might be looking at. And I think we've all seen this wiring bird's nest right here. Even though I did relocate these isolated studs from here to there, I didn't change any of the wiring. I didn't get the polarity wrong. I didn't get the polarity wrong at the batteries here. And I had to Google how to do a continuity test and a short test on the motor. And then I also had to figure out how the speed controller worked, because it didn't feel like I had any real throttle. Now, if you might notice, this wire right here goes all the way to the front, because I did find out the problem was with the throttle itself. Somewhere in the harness, right there, all the way back to here is an open. I don't know where the open is, so I just ran a temporary harness, because this is a 5,000 ohm resistor for the throttle itself. And if I go ahead and connect this back up again to the speed controller that it's supposed to be, and I do have the cart off the ground, which is why, man, I wish I would have done that yesterday when I was baking in the sun. I'm hooked up right there. Power's on. So that's reverse. That's forward. Now if I hit the accelerator, and this does have brake on it, so that works. And if I put it in reverse, that works again. So you can imagine how relieved I feel knowing that it was something as simple as the harness. I don't know what's wrong with the harness. I didn't touch that part of the harness. As I was troubleshooting this, I did notice that some previous tech had marked the stator 1, stator 2, armature 1, armature 2 back there. This has a, I don't know what that is right there. And that harness goes all the way to the front, and this should just be the throttle. So I'm just going to reroute this harness right there. One thing I picked up is that we have battery positive, battery negative, and on the front right here, this one wire, I think that's J1 is what they call it, that gets 36 volts from the ignition right there. So without that on, the speed controller doesn't work either. So now I'm fairly convinced that I do have it back to life and back to working. So now I just need to go ahead, connect all, or secure all the harnesses that I have to make sure they don't get pinched or damaged. And then of course the last thing is going to be where we started, getting the solar connected and operating. Now I decided to go with the bougerv 40 amp MPP charge controller. This one was set up, it said, to operate 36 volt. Be surprised how rare it is to find a 36 volt charge controller. I tried a Victron Energy one, but it was only 48, 24 volt. And the most common one I was seeing a lot of golf cart hackers using is that, yeah, so see right there, it'll do 36 volt. The most common one I saw a lot of people using, and which I did try initially as a test, was the Renogy Rover. That would take 12 volt solar panels and up the voltage somehow using magic to charge 36 volts with lower voltages. So usually with your solar array, you need to have a higher voltage gradient, and it gets stepped down to a lower voltage gradient. So the Renogy Rover just wanted to keep all 3 of these panels in parallel, not in series, so we would only have an open circuit voltage of 24 volt, which is substantially less than 36 volt or the 38 or 39 volts of these batteries. But the Rover is supposed to boost it up to 36 volt. I found the whole system to be chaotic. The app control did not respond. It took me a while to actually get the whole thing back to life. And unfortunately, the biggest problem is the biggest problem I have with a lot of these charge controllers, especially for golf carts and some motorhomes that use the dimensions inverter. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, golf carts usually have this solid state charger right there. But what happens is those chargers won't charge a battery that's either dead or very highly depleted. So if you have a 36 volt battery bank and it's only reading 20 volt, that charger, the golf cart charger, won't start charging the batteries. The Renogy Rover was the exact same problem. So to make it work, if the batteries are too dead, you have to get a secondary charger so that the main charger sees battery voltage and then starts charging. The dimensions inverters that some of these 2000 to 2008 RVs had the exact same problem. If the house batteries were too dead, they actually wouldn't charge a battery. And I think it's absurd that a charger won't charge dead batteries, and you have to get a second charger in order to charge batteries with the charger. So that's another reason why I didn't want to use the Renogy Rover. I hope a lot of that made sense. My understanding is with this charge controller, once you have it set up for 36 volt, it will go ahead and charge even dead batteries. But because it is an MPPT charge controller, we need to have that voltage gradient, so we need to have much higher voltage from the array than we're going to be trying to charge with. And if I did my math correctly, we're going to have these three panels in series. So we're going to add all the voltages together with the open current circuit, which is 24, 48, and I guess that's 72 roughly. And on this one, we got the MS4840N is in November. Our maximum input voltage is going to be 150 volts. So we're half of that, so we should be more than adequate. And of course, we won't get anywhere close to the 40 amp output that this thing has. Each one of these panels is only 100 watts. So I'm hoping, best case scenario, if we get 300 watts output from that at 36 volts, that's maybe 8 amps or 8 amps of current. So we shouldn't be anywhere close to that. However, because it is capable of doing that, I do have this circuit breaker disconnect. It is rated for 40 amps. But if the owner does want to upgrade down the road, maybe you have a roof over the top of this with more panels or portable solar panels, they do have that option using this charge controller. So I've never used this one before. I don't even use bougerv very often, but they were the only ones that I could find that was going to have what I needed it to be. And the connections look to be pretty easy to get to. It's magnetic base right there. And it does have an app, so you can do all this from the phone. It did come with, where is it at? Oh, a battery temperature sensor, because if you have lead acid batteries, you might need that. But we're going to lithium iron phosphate, and this does have lithium iron or lithium battery profiles on it already. So I'm probably just going to go ahead and mount this right about there. And while I could route the solar power to that bus bar right down there, it's going to make a lot more sense to me just to keep the wiring all right in here, because there was no other place to really put it other than to make a bracket that would hang down from here. All right, so I put the charge controller over here. This is where I think everybody's going to be upset with me, because I put the solar to charge up basically this battery right here. I just feel better about it anyways, rather than running the cables through this flex point right there. The PV cables already ran right there. I'll secure that all out of the way. Very similar to how I already did this side over here. But with this connected, get that out of the way. I'll put this on. It's just, hold on, there were some magnets. I'm sure it'll fall out anyways. So I think really the last part I'm going to do is secure this cable on this side. Then I can Put the plywood back down, cut a hole in the deck for the PV cables to run through. Obviously get the bus bar secured down there too. And then if you look on the back side of the solar array, I did wire everything in series. That's the positive wire, that's the negative wire. If I get a multimeter, even with a little bit of indirect light right here, which is basically going to be shade, right? Positive there. And then go to negative right there. We're still getting 51 volts, even in the shade. Probably can't carry any current, but this array is going to work out. And then I'm just using some residential panel clips to secure the wires too. Pretty easy access underneath the panels. But like I said, I have it in series, so this one is connected to this one, which is connected to that one, which is connected to that one, which is connected to that one. So we're adding up the voltages, amperages stay the same. Very similar to how you would be doing batteries. All right, so first thing first, we got the one battery over here, overcurrent protection from the battery itself, because this litime does not have a circuit breaker built into it or an on-off switch. This becomes the on-off or disconnect for that battery. We have the bougerv 40 amp MPP charge controller, 36 volt to charge these batteries up, and this is the overcurrent protection from that charge controller. I made sure that it would work pretty well over here. Now the cart came with this fire hose used as a spacer for the battery box, but I found that worked pretty well to reduce any sort of chafing as loom for the battery cables. These are the PV wires that I have routed through that harness right there. They'll come up through this hole I just drilled out. You can see the bus bar right there. That's going to be the fuse for the 36 volt to 12 volt converter, because it taps off power from there over to here. You can see that fire hose again I used. Kind of a mirror image over here, except for the connection for this quick disconnect wasn't quite long enough with the cables, because I was trying to keep the cables balanced out from that length to this length, which is very important to people with lithium batteries. They get very vocal about the whole thing. So I used an inline fuse holder as an isolator stud. So that's negative, negative, positive, positive, just as an extension. Just put some silicone over there to help prevent any sort of accidental shorting on it. And right there is just going to be the inline fuse holder for the 12 volt tap from this 12 volt that goes up to, oh wait, it's not going to work until I plug at least one of those in. LED headlight right there, because we need 12 volt for that, and some 12 volt for the controls on the system too. I did make sure that when you close this, that battery cable is not going to get pinched. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and unplug this again. Okay. Overall, I think it looks like a very clean installation. I'm pretty proud of it, to be completely honest. Now we just have to slide that forward. Just stick out right there. All right, last thing for me to do is put that solar array back on. Alright, the last thing to do is hook that up. More screws to put in. So I think I got it all set. That side there. Well, it's very quiet, except for the plywood that's bouncing around back there. So far, things look pretty good. It's kind of fun. Try to take it on a little bit smoother course here. Well, it definitely doesn't have a top speed of a golf cart. I don't know if that speed controller can handle it or not. Go ahead and turn around right here. It's kind of fun. See right down there is that new I ran by my foot. I ran 2 extra wires just in case future technician needs it. Now, I didn't have a before, obviously, to compare this to. This seems like a pretty heavy truck, but it's pretty smooth with acceleration. Now, I'm not here to spend other people's money. It might be nice to have a nice battery indicator, a Victron LCD display up here on the dash with a power shunt on it. But that's going to be a pretty big installation too. But naturally, anytime I do a solar project, the clouds come in, so I can't even test out the solar panels. I have to leave it right here until I get a little less cloudy sky, and then I can finally test out the solar panels to see if they're out operating, what kind of wattage they're putting out, especially when you're driving. It's a nice, bright, sunny day the next day. This is high noon, about as good as coverage we're gonna get. And a few things I will point out is because these are in series, just this little bit of shade right there is really gonna knock the performance of this entire array down. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open the app right here. I did do a test drive up and down this course already once. Obviously the batteries are fully charged because it was already charged when I parked it last night, and it's been in the sun this whole time. One thing I will point out is on the drive south, my amperage is going to probably be around 0.9, not very high. Where those panels get full sun, no shade on them whatsoever, I might be getting close to 5 amps, which isn't a lot of current, you wouldn't think, but you might be able to see the voltage actually, so it is actually charging the battery as I'm using it. So inevitably, if I was driving north for a prolonged period of time with a fully charged battery, I may not actually run out of charge or be depleting the batteries. Of course, eventually the sun will move off of noon. All right, so we'll go ahead and start driving. All right, so you can kind of see right now our state of charge is 39.4 volts. Now as I'm accelerated, it dropped down to 39.2. Let's see. Looks like it called me a liar. We're at 1.8 amps driving south. Oh, look at that. We've actually pumped up quite a bit. But I do have the pedal all the way down. And we're at 38.9. Alright, so let me go ahead and reposition. Do a U-turn right here. So we can head back north. And now you can see that's 100% full sun. Kind of to point out, since I'm right here anyways, I'll have my shadow with a little bit of shade right there. Then we drop down to 1.2. I get out of the way again, get it back into full sun, we creep back up 4.7 amps. So I've tried to point that out as well too, is you really need to understand how little shade actually does affect a solar array. And so when it comes to RVs, just having an AC casting a little bit of shade or a vent lid can cause problems. But let's go ahead and head back north again. Okay, so we're at 39.4, but we are pumping out quite a bit more amperage now from the panels. 38.7, 38.9. So I'm still heading north. We'll see if maybe we get above 39 volts just in this city block. It's not even quite a city block distance. So I do have my foot all the way down, so we're going as fast as we can. halfway done with this run. Doesn't quite look like we're going to get up to 39 volts, but it didn't drop as far as the voltage goes. In fact, if anything, we came up a little bit from the 38.7 that we were before. Still holding solid there. And I'm going to have to stop now. But at the end of the road here, 39.2 than I thought we were going to, or planned on. We did at least keep it from depleting as we were driving north. Now you can see this does cause a little bit of shade to fall on it now, but we are past the fall equinox, so the sun's going further and further south. If it was middle of summer, that'd be straight down. We wouldn't have any shade. My final thoughts are maybe it would be better to build up a roof right here, maybe over the driver so that they're not in the shade. But my understanding is the owner of this uses it to move trailers around, so you don't want to lose that viewing angle all behind the driver anyways. And you had a roof over the driver's compartment right here, you'd be casting even more shade. But you would have, you know, more solar panels. Its off-road capabilities is not something I would like to drive around a lot. Not a lot of suspension on it. So I think overall I'm pretty pleased with the way the whole thing did turn out. There is still room, I guess, theoretically to put a charger back there, but the whole point of this is not to use a charger, but to use the sun to keep it charged. I think if it were me, and what I would recommend to the owner, would be to get a couple of these rubber bumpers right here, mount them on the bottom side of the rack so they're not actually mounted in anything other than the rack. That'll help do a little bit of compressive force to keep this from rattling. Perfect. Love it. I do hope the owner is going to be pleased with the way this turned out. I didn't expect it to take as long as it ultimately did take to do this entire job. I thought it was just going to be a fun, maybe 1 day, 2 day project, but it definitely ballooned out of control when it comes to that. I did learn a lot about using the aluminum 2020. I think it's a pretty good option. We'll see how it holds up. This doesn't have any real suspension on it, so he might report to me that the whole thing fell apart, but I think I built it strong enough to prevent that. And if he adds those rubber isolator cushions, I think that'll prolong the life of it substantially. Oh yeah, can't forget one of the most important things. One of these batteries weighs 26 kilograms or 57 pounds. So around up to 60 times 6. I guess that's 360 pounds of battery. And while I didn't weigh it at the time, because this is not a battery video, these are about 60 pounds a piece, and that I could really feel that when I was lifting it up. So the weight of one of those lead acid batteries, but the performance of at least 3 of them, that's not too bad. Overall, I wouldn't say this was fun, but it was interesting. And I know it's a little bit different content than I normally put on this channel, but I think this does have that Venn diagram of a lot of different overlapping fields that make sense for me and for RVs going forward. So we do have lithium batteries, solar power, powering a vehicle. One of my most common questions I get is, when are they going to make an all-electric RV? And I think this is pretty much how it's going to be. Obviously it'll be a lot bigger, a lot more panels, but this is, I think, the future of it. And I think if you have a utility cart or a golf cart that you keep outside anyways, it's probably the way to move forward, is just keep the solar panel on top of it. It won't keep enough power going when you're in the sun to go forever, so it's not endless supply of power, but it will always keep your batteries charged up and should theoretically in full sun provide at least 300 watts of more power directly to the wheels. So I think it's kind of the future, and thanks a lot for watching, guys. Bye. Did I mention it's a lot of fun too? A lot of fun.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
We'll back up some.
Okay.
We want to get the whole thing in there.
Oh, okay. Are you gonna drive away?
They're too far back.
Oh, okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
I tell you, when I parked this thing over here about a month ago, the sun was underneath the cover, and I've just been baking in the sun this whole time. It was dead in the water. I can't move this until I get the power hooked up. Also, you may not believe this, but I already have a customer with another golf cart. They want me to upgrade.